Before we dive into this story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The Monday morning subway car smelled like a combination of stale coffee, wet newspaper, and the collective regret of 200 people who'd hit snooze one too many times. Natalie Chen clutched the metal pole with one hand and her portfolio bag with the other, trying to maintain balance as the train lurched through the tunnel like a drunk robot learning to walk. Her interview was in 45 minutes, and she was already sweating through the supposedly sweat-proof blouse she'd bought specifically for this occasion. So much for truth in advertising. Around her, the subway car was packed tighter than a can of sardines at a sardine convention. Bodies pressed against bodies, creating a humid human sandwich that made Natalie reconsider every life choice that had led her to this moment. A businessman with exceptionally sharp elbows was reading the Wall Street Journal approximately 3 inches from her face. A teenager, with headphones blasting music so loud she could hear every word, was bobbing his head rhythmically into her shoulder. And directly in front of her, a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stood reading something on his phone, seemingly unbothered by the chaos surrounding him. Natalie envied his calm. She was the opposite of calm. She was a tornado of anxiety wrapped in a discount blazer from Marshall's, held together by determination and approximately 6 cups of coffee she'd consumed since 5:30 that morning. Her resume was printed on expensive cream-colored paper that she definitely couldn't afford, but had purchased anyway because the internet said it made you look professional. Her shoes were the uncomfortable kind that magazines promised would make you feel powerful, but actually just made your feet feel like they were being slowly murdered. And her makeup, applied with shaking hands on a moving train, probably made her look less like a competent professional and more like a raccoon who'd gotten into someone's cosmetics bag. The train screeched to a halt at the next station, and more people somehow managed to cram themselves into the already impossible space. Natalie felt herself being pushed backward, her grip on the pole loosening as a wave of commuters surged forward. She stumbled, her portfolio bag swinging dangerously, and that's when she felt it. The unmistakable sensation of her heel catching on something, her balance shifting, her body tilting in a direction that gravity found hilarious and Natalie found terrifying. She was going down, in a crowded subway car, 40 minutes before the most important interview of her life. Of course this was happening. This was exactly the kind of thing that happened to Natalie Chen, who had once managed to lock herself out of her apartment while taking out the trash in her pajamas, and who had accidentally sent her landlord a meme about bad landlords instead of her rent payment confirmation. The universe had a sense of humor, and Natalie was apparently the punchline. But then, miraculously, she didn't fall. A hand caught her elbow, steadying her, and another hand gently guided her back to an upright position. Natalie looked up, preparing to thank her savior, and found herself staring into the most striking pair of dark brown eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to the man in the charcoal suit, who was now looking at her with a mixture of concern and something that might have been amusement. "Careful," he said, his voice low and smooth, the kind of voice that probably made people agree to things they normally wouldn't agree to. The morning commute is already dangerous enough without adding gymnastics to the mix. Natalie felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you. I was about to become a very embarrassing viral video." "The internet does love a good subway fall," he agreed, and there was definitely amusement in his eyes now. "Though you managed to make almost falling look remarkably graceful." "That's me," Natalie said, trying to inject some confidence into her voice, despite the fact that her heart was still racing, and she was very aware that this incredibly attractive stranger was still holding her elbow. "Grace is my middle name. Well, actually it's Marie, but Grace should have been my middle name, except I'm not graceful at all, so maybe it's good that it's Marie. I'm going to stop talking now." The man smiled, a slow, genuine smile that transformed his entire face from conventionally handsome to absolutely devastating. "I'm Ethan," he said, finally releasing her elbow, though Natalie noticed he positioned himself slightly in front of her, creating a small buffer between her and the rest of the crowded car. "Natalie," she replied, then immediately wondered if she should have given a fake name, because wasn't that what you were supposed to do with attractive strangers on public transportation? Though that advice was probably more about safety than about avoiding embarrassment when you inevitably did something awkward. "Nice to meet you, Natalie Marie, who is graceful in spirit if not in practice," Ethan said, and there was something playful in his tone that made Natalie's stomach do a little flip. "Big day ahead?" Natalie glanced down at her portfolio bag and overly formal outfit. "Is it that obvious? You have the look of someone preparing for battle. Interview? That obvious too?" "I've conducted enough of them to recognize the signs," Ethan said. "The good news is, you've already survived a near-death experience this morning, so statistically speaking, your interview should be relatively easy." Natalie laughed despite her nerves. That's one way to look at it, though I'm not sure survived a subway stumble is the kind of accomplishment that impresses hiring managers. "You'd be surprised," Ethan said mysteriously. "Some of the best employees I've ever hired were the ones who could laugh at themselves and keep going after minor disasters." "Minor disasters are kind of my specialty," Natalie admitted. "Last week I accidentally replied, all to a company-wide email with a gif of a cat falling off a table. I was trying to send it to my friend, but apparently I don't understand how email works." Ethan's smile widened. "What was the email about?" "Quarterly projections." "And you sent a gif of a falling cat?" In my defense, it was very relevant to how I felt about the quarterly projections, Natalie said. Also, I hadn't slept in like 30 hours because I'd been working on a pitch that my boss ended up rejecting anyway, because apparently, innovative social media strategies aren't what accounting firms are looking for. "Their loss," Ethan said, and he sounded sincere rather than just polite. The train lurched again, and this time Natalie was ready for it, adjusting her stance and maintaining her balance. Ethan nodded approvingly. "Quick learner. That's another good quality in an employee." "Are you always thinking about employee qualities?" Natalie asked. "Because that seems like a very intense way to ride the subway." "Occupational hazard," Ethan admitted. "Though usually I drive to work. Today my car decided to make concerning noises, so I'm experiencing the joys of public transportation for the first time in probably 6 months." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. You're one of those people with a reserved parking spot and an assistant who brings you coffee exactly how you like it." "Guilty on both counts," Ethan said, not looking even slightly apologetic. "Though to be fair, I bring my assistant coffee too. It's a reciprocal relationship." "How very egalitarian of you," Natalie said dryly. "I try," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling with humor. "So, what kind of position are you interviewing for? Besides the kind that requires expensive resume paper and shoes that look extremely uncomfortable." Natalie glanced down at her feet. "How did you know my shoes are uncomfortable?" "Because they're the interview shoes version of uncomfortable. There's a specific look, painful but professional." "They promised to make me feel powerful," Natalie said sadly. "Instead, they're making me feel like my toes are staging a rebellion." "Classic advertising deception," Ethan commiserated. "So, the interview?" "Marketing coordinator position at Hartley & Sullivan," Natalie said, trying not to sound as nervous as she felt. "It's a big company, very prestigious, very intimidating. The kind of place where everyone probably has perfect hair and knows how to use all the features in Excel instead of just the basic ones, like us normal people." "Hartley & Sullivan," Ethan repeated thoughtfully. That's a good company. Very good, actually. Competitive, but fair. Good benefits. Strong company culture. You'd probably like it there. Natalie stared at him. How do you know all that? Do you work there? I'm familiar with them, Ethan said vaguely. They have a good reputation in the business community. Great. So I'm competing against approximately 700 other qualified candidates for a position at a company known for being selective and prestigious, Natalie said, her earlier anxiety returning full force. This is fine. Everything is fine. I'm definitely not going to throw up on the interviewer. You're not going to throw up, Ethan said firmly. You're going to walk in there, be yourself, which based on this conversation is funny and honest and creative, and you're going to show them exactly why they'd be idiots not to hire you. You got all that from me almost falling on the subway? I got all that from watching you turn a near disaster into a joke, from the way you talk about your work, even when you're clearly frustrated with it, and from the fact that you're brave enough to send cat gifs in response to quarterly projections, Ethan said. Trust me, those are exactly the kind of qualities that good companies are looking for. Natalie felt warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the crowded subway car. Thank you. That's possibly the nicest thing anyone said to me all week, or month, or possibly year. Then the people in your life aren't paying attention, Ethan said, and there was something in his voice that made Natalie's breath catch. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the chaos of the subway fading into background noise. Natalie became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how Ethan's presence seemed to create a bubble of calm in the middle of the morning rush. She caught the faint scent of his cologne, something clean and expensive that probably cost more than her rent. The train announcer's garbled voice crackled over the speaker, announcing the next stop. Natalie glanced at the subway map and felt her stomach drop. This was her stop. In approximately 30 seconds, she would have to leave this bizarre but wonderful conversation and go face the terror of her interview alone. This is me, she said reluctantly, as the train began to slow. Thank you again for the save, and the pep talk, and the statistical analysis of my survival odds. My pleasure, Ethan said, and he looked genuinely sorry to see her go. Good luck with the interview, Natalie. Remember, you've already conquered the subway. Corporate America should be easy in comparison. The train doors opened, and Natalie was swept along with the crowd of exiting passengers. She glanced back once and saw Ethan still standing there, watching her with that slight smile on his face. Their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them, something that felt significant and impossible and completely insane, given that they'd known each other for all of 10 minutes. Then the crowd pushed forward, and Ethan disappeared from view. The doors closed, the train pulled away, and Natalie was left standing on the platform with her portfolio bag, her uncomfortable shoes, and the strangest feeling that she'd just met someone important. She shook her head, trying to clear away the romantic fog that had apparently settled over her brain. This was ridiculous. People didn't meet their soulmates on the subway. That was the kind of thing that happened in romantic comedies, not in real life. Real life involved uncomfortable shoes and quarterly projections and interviews that you were definitely going to be late for if you didn't start moving right now. Natalie checked her phone and felt her heart rate spike. 28 minutes until her interview. The office was a 15-minute walk from the subway station, which meant she had exactly 13 minutes to find a bathroom, fix her makeup, practice her breathing exercises, and transform into a calm, confident professional instead of the sweaty, flustered mess she currently resembled. She power-walked through the station, dodging slower pedestrians and trying not to trip over her own feet. The morning air hit her face as she emerged onto the street, and she took a deep breath, letting the oxygen clear her head. She could do this. She'd prepared for weeks, memorized answers to every possible interview question, researched the company until she could probably write their annual report from memory. She was qualified. She was ready. She was going to walk into that office and show them exactly why Natalie Chen deserved this position. Or she was going to trip over her own feet, accidentally insult someone important, and end her career before it even started. Either way, it would at least be memorable. The Hartley & Sullivan building was exactly as intimidating as Natalie had feared. All gleaming glass and steel, rising up into the sky like a monument to corporate success, and making everyone who entered feel approximately 3 inches tall. Natalie stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the building and trying to summon every ounce of confidence she possessed. The lobby was even worse. Marble floors that reflected everything like a mirror, showing Natalie exactly how disheveled she looked after her subway adventure. A security desk manned by guards who looked like they took their jobs very seriously. Perfectly dressed people walking purposefully past, all of them looking like they belonged here, while Natalie felt like an imposter in a cheap blazer. She approached the security desk, trying to project confidence instead of terror. "Hi, I have an interview with Patricia Morrison in HR, Natalie Chen." The guard checked his list, found her name, and handed her a visitor badge. 32nd floor. Elevators are to your right. Natalie took the badge with shaking hands and headed toward the elevators. The 32nd floor. Of course it was the 32nd floor. Because apparently they needed to give her plenty of time during the elevator ride to contemplate all the ways this could go wrong. The elevator was thankfully empty when it arrived, giving Natalie a moment of privacy to check her reflection in the polished metal walls. Her makeup had survived the subway ordeal reasonably well, though her hair looked slightly more chaotic than she'd intended. She smoothed it down as best she could, straightened her blazer, and practiced her smile. Confident, professional, like someone who definitely hadn't almost fallen on her face 20 minutes ago. The elevator numbers climbed steadily. 10th floor, 15th, 22nd. Natalie's heartbeat accelerated in rhythm with the ascending numbers. 28th, 29th, 30th. The doors opened with a quiet ding that sounded like a funeral bell. Natalie stepped out into a reception area that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed offices should resemble luxury spas. Soft lighting, comfortable-looking furniture in tasteful neutrals, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Natalie's entire education. A receptionist, who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I have a 10 o'clock interview with Patricia Morrison," Natalie said, pleased that her voice came out steady instead of the terrified squeak she'd been expecting. "Natalie Chen." "Of course, Miss Chen. Please have a seat. Ms. Morrison will be with you shortly." Natalie sat in one of the comfortable chairs, which was actually comfortable unlike most waiting room furniture that seemed designed specifically to make people uncomfortable. She pulled out her phone, thinking she'd review her notes one more time, but the Wi-Fi connection request caught her attention. She clicked accept and watched as her phone connected to the building's network. That's when she noticed she had 5 unread text messages, all from her roommate, Jamie. "How's the interview?" "You're going to kill it. Remember to smile and make eye contact. But not too much eye contact. Don't be weird about it." "Good luck!" Natalie smiled, typing back quickly. "Haven't started yet. Currently sitting in the world's fanciest waiting room trying not to throw up from nerves." Jamie's response was immediate. "You've got this. Just be yourself. Unless being yourself means sending cat gifs, then maybe be a slightly more professional version of yourself." Natalie was typing a response when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to see a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled hair and a kind smile. "Natalie Chen? I'm Patricia Morrison. It's lovely to meet you." Natalie stood, tucking her phone away and extending her hand for a shake. Patricia's grip was firm and warm, and her smile seemed genuine rather than the fake, professional smile Natalie had been expecting. "Thank you so much for this opportunity," Natalie said, falling back on the script she'd practiced approximately 100 times. "I'm very excited to be here." "We're excited to meet you," Patricia said. "Your application stood out among a very strong candidate pool. Shall we head to the conference room?" Natalie followed Patricia down a hallway lined with offices that all looked organized and professional and nothing like the chaos of Natalie's current workspace. They turned a corner and entered a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. And sitting at the head of the conference table, reviewing what appeared to be Natalie's resume, was Ethan from the subway. Natalie stopped dead in her tracks, her brain short-circuiting as it tried to process what she was seeing. Ethan, the friendly stranger who'd saved her from falling, the man who'd given her a pep talk and made her laugh and looked at her like she was interesting instead of just another commuter in a crowded train car. He was here, in her interview, wearing the same charcoal suit and looking just as attractive as he had 20 minutes ago, except now he was also looking extremely professional and sitting at the head of the conference table like he belonged there. Oh God. Oh no. Natalie's brain supplied several possibilities at once, none of them good. He was another interviewer. He was a senior staff member observing the interview process. He was Patricia's boss, who happened to be sitting in on this particular interview, for reasons that Natalie definitely didn't want to contemplate. Ethan looked up from the resume, and their eyes met. Natalie watched several emotions flicker across his face in rapid succession. Surprise, recognition, something that might have been delight, and then finally settling on professional composure. But there was still amusement in his eyes, that same warmth she'd seen on the subway. "Ms. Chen," Ethan said, his voice perfectly professional, but with an undertone that Natalie recognized from their earlier conversation. "What a pleasant surprise. Please, have a seat." Patricia looked between them curiously. "Do you two know each other?" "We met on the subway this morning," Ethan said smoothly. "I had the pleasure of preventing Ms. Chen from becoming a viral video when she nearly fell during a particularly aggressive train lurch." Natalie felt her face burn. Of course he would mention that. Of course her professional introduction to whatever important person Ethan was would involve the revelation that she'd almost face-planted in a subway car 30 minutes ago. "How chivalrous," Patricia said with a smile. "Though I'm not surprised. Ethan is known for his excellent timing." "Ethan," Natalie repeated slowly, her brain still trying to process. "And you work here, at Hartley & Sullivan, where I'm interviewing." "I do work here," Ethan confirmed, and there was definitely amusement dancing in his eyes now. "Though I may have understated my position slightly when we spoke earlier." "Understated how?" Natalie asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. Patricia laughed. "Natalie, I don't think we've been properly introduced. This is Ethan Hartley. He's the CEO of Hartley & Sullivan." The world tilted slightly. Natalie gripped the back of the conference chair, wondering if it was possible to spontaneously combust from embarrassment. Ethan wasn't just some friendly commuter. He wasn't even just an employee. He was the CIO, the actual CEO of the company where she was interviewing, the man who owned the building she was standing in. And she'd told him that she'd sent cat gifts in response to quarterly projections and complained about her uncomfortable shoes and basically word-vomited her entire neurotic personality all over him in a crowded subway car. "The CEO," Natalie said weakly. "Of course you are. Because why would my life be simple or straightforward when it could be a constant series of humiliating disasters?" Ethan's professional composure cracked, and he laughed, that same genuine laugh from the subway. "In my defense, you never asked my last name, and you seemed nervous enough about the interview without me adding, 'By the way, I'm the person who's going to be deciding whether to hire you to the conversation." "That's very considerate," Natalie said, though her voice came out slightly strangled. "I'm sure my panic attack would have been much more impressive if I'd known I was trauma dumping on my potential future boss." "I wouldn't call it trauma dumping," Ethan said. "I'd call it an honest conversation with a stranger on public transportation who happened to ask questions. An honest conversation where I told the CEO of a major corporation that I don't understand how email works. An honest conversation where you demonstrated self-awareness, humor under pressure, and the ability to laugh at yourself," Ethan corrected. "All of which, as I mentioned on the subway, are excellent qualities in an employee." Patricia was watching this exchange with barely concealed delight. "Should I leave you two to continue catching up, or shall we proceed with the actual interview?" "The interview," Natalie said quickly. "Let's definitely do the professional interview, where I pretend to be a competent adult instead of someone who almost fell on her face this morning." "Too late for that," Ethan said cheerfully. "I've already seen behind the curtain, but please, sit down. Let's make this official." Natalie sat, clutching her portfolio bag like a life preserver. This was fine. Everything was fine. She was just interviewing for a job at a prestigious company, while the CEO who'd witnessed her near subway disaster watched. Totally normal, completely professional. Not at all the most mortifying situation she'd ever found herself in. Patricia settled into a chair across from Natalie, pulling out a tablet and stylus. "So, Natalie, why don't we start with you telling us a bit about your background and what attracted you to this position?" Natalie took a deep breath, reaching for the script she'd practiced, the professional answers she'd prepared. But then she caught Ethan's eye, and he gave her the tiniest nod of encouragement, and she remembered what he'd said on the subway. "Be yourself. Show them why they'd be idiots not to hire you." So instead of the rehearsed speech about her passion for integrated marketing strategies and her commitment to brand development, Natalie decided to take a risk. "Honestly," she said, "I'm attracted to this position because I'm tired of working at places that don't value creativity. I'm tired of sending innovative proposals that get rejected because they're too different from what we've always done. I'm tired of being told to think outside the box and then being punished when I actually do it. From everything I've researched about Hartley and Sullivan, you actually mean it when you say you want innovation. You don't just talk about progressive marketing strategies, you actually implement them. And I want to be part of that. I want to work somewhere that appreciates cat gifts in response to quarterly projections, instead of firing people for them." There was a moment of silence. Natalie wondered if she'd just torpedoed her entire interview. But then Patricia smiled, and Ethan leaned back in his chair with an expression of satisfaction. "For the record," Ethan said, "I think the cat gif was probably appropriate. Quarterly projections are often falling cat-worthy." "See?" Natalie said, feeling a surge of confidence. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. A company culture where humor and honesty are valued alongside professionalism." The interview continued from there, but something had shifted. Instead of the formal, rehearsed question and answer session Natalie had been expecting, it felt more like a conversation. Patricia asked about her experience, and Natalie answered honestly, talking about both her successes and her failures. She described the social media campaign that had increased engagement by 300%, and she also admitted to the presentation where she'd accidentally left a snarky comment in the speaker notes that got projected on the screen during a client meeting. "What did the comment say?" Ethan asked, clearly entertained. Natalie winced. It said, "This is the most boring thing I've ever written, and I once had to catalog office supplies for 6 hours straight." And the client saw this? The client saw it. The client's boss saw it. My boss saw it. The janitor probably saw it. It was displayed on a screen approximately the size of a movie theater for what felt like 700 years, but was probably actually about 15 seconds. "What happened?" Patricia asked. I owned it, Natalie said. I looked the client directly in the eye and said, "Clearly, we need to rethink our approach to this presentation, because even I'm bored." And I wrote it. "Let's start over and make something actually worth your time." And then I spent the next 4 hours completely redesigning the pitch, and we ended up landing the account because the client appreciated the honesty and the willingness to start from scratch instead of defending mediocre work. Ethan nodded approvingly. "That's excellent crisis management." "That's me realizing I'd already destroyed my career, so I might as well go down swinging," Natalie corrected. "But yes, it worked out surprisingly well." "Tell us about a time when you had to work with a difficult team member," Patricia said, moving through what was clearly a standard interview question. Natalie considered giving a diplomatic answer, but she'd already committed to honesty. "My last boss was impossible. He wanted innovative ideas, but rejected anything that wasn't his idea first. He wanted team collaboration, but took credit for everyone else's work. He wanted dedication, but got angry when people worked late because it made him look bad for leaving at 5 o'clock. "That does sound difficult," Patricia said. "How did you handle it?" "Honestly, not well," Natalie admitted. "I spent 6 months trying to make it work. I tried communicating directly. I tried going through HR. I tried adapting my style to match his preferences. Nothing worked. So eventually I started looking for new opportunities, which is why I'm here today. Sometimes the best way to handle a difficult team member is to recognize when the situation is unsalvageable and find a better environment." "That's refreshingly honest," Ethan said. "Most candidates give us carefully crafted stories about how they turned difficult situations into learning opportunities through communication and teamwork." "I mean, I did learn something," Natalie said. "I learned that not every professional relationship is worth salvaging, and that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is cut your losses and move on. I also learned that I should probably stop sending cat gifs as emotional responses, but that's a work in progress." The interview continued for another 45 minutes. They discussed Natalie's portfolio, her strategic approach to social media marketing, her experience with various platforms and analytics tools. She showed them campaigns she'd designed, explained her creative process, walked them through her successes and failures with equal honesty. And through it all, Natalie was acutely aware of Ethan watching her, not in an uncomfortable way, but with genuine interest, asking thoughtful follow-up questions, occasionally smiling at her answers. It was disconcerting and thrilling and completely unlike any interview she'd ever experienced. Finally, Patricia glanced at her tablet and nodded. "I think we've covered everything I wanted to ask. Ethan, do you have any final questions?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying Natalie with those dark brown eyes that had first caught her attention on the subway. "Just one," he said. "Why should we hire you?" It was the classic interview question, the one every career advisor said to prepare for. Natalie had a practiced answer ready, something about her unique skill set and proven track record and commitment to excellence. But looking at Ethan, remembering their conversation on the subway, she decided to tell him the truth. "Because I care," she said simply. "I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true. I care about the work I do. I care about making things better, more engaging, more effective. I care enough to send cat gifts when quarterly projections are boring, because I think we should be having more honest conversations about what's actually working and what isn't. I care enough to completely redesign a presentation when I realize it's not good enough. I care enough to keep learning, keep growing, keep trying even when I fail spectacularly. And based on everything I know about Hartley and Sullivan, you're a company that cares too. So I think we'd be a good fit." The conference room was silent for a moment. Then Ethan smiled, stood up, and extended his hand across the table. "Thank you for coming in today, Natalie. This was one of the most interesting interviews I've conducted in years." Natalie stood as well, shaking his hand, and trying not to think about how warm his grip was, or how his thumb grazed her wrist in a way that felt almost intentional. "Thank you for the opportunity, and for saving me on the subway. That was above and beyond CEO duties." "Just good citizenship," Ethan said, but his eyes were warm with something that felt like more than professional courtesy. "We'll be in touch soon about next steps." Patricia walked Natalie back to the elevator, chatting pleasantly about the company culture and the team she'd be working with if she got the position. Natalie nodded and smiled and tried to pay attention, but her mind was still back in the conference room, replaying every moment of the interview, every look Ethan had given her, every comment that had felt like it meant something more than the words actually said. The elevator doors closed, and Natalie finally allowed herself to breathe. She'd done it. She'd survived the interview. She'd even, somehow, managed to turn her subway disaster into a conversation point instead of a source of humiliation. And Ethan, the impossible, attractive CEO Ethan, had seemed genuinely impressed rather than amused by her chaos. Her phone buzzed as the elevator descended. Jamie again. "How did it go?" Natalie typed back. "I'll tell you when I get home. You're not going to believe this." What she didn't see, couldn't have seen, was Ethan standing at the window of the conference room on the 32nd floor, watching the street below where Natalie would emerge in approximately 90 seconds. He was smiling slightly, his usually serious expression softened by something that looked remarkably like anticipation. "Well," Patricia said from behind him, "that was certainly interesting." "She's perfect for the position," Ethan said without turning around. "I was thinking the same thing," Patricia agreed, "though I'm curious about something. When exactly did you decide to sit in on this particular interview? Because I don't remember you being on the schedule." Ethan turned to face her, his expression innocent. "My morning got rearranged when my car broke down. I had a free hour, and I remembered you mentioning a strong candidate pool for the marketing coordinator position. Seemed like good timing." "Uh-huh," Patricia said, clearly not buying it for a second. "And the fact that you spent the entire interview looking at her, like she was the most fascinating person you'd ever met, has nothing to do with anything?" "I look at all promising candidates with interest," Ethan said. "Ethan," Patricia said gently, "I've worked with you for 8 years. I've seen you conduct probably 500 interviews. I have never seen you smile that much, not even close." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then smiled again, that same genuine smile that transformed his face. "She sent a cat gif in response to quarterly projections, Patricia. How am I supposed to not be charmed by that? You're the CEO of a major corporation. You're supposed to be professional and distant, and definitely not charmed by candidates who admit to sending inappropriate gifs." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "Or maybe I've spent too many years being professional and distant, and I'm allowed to appreciate someone who's refreshingly honest and funny and brave enough to be herself in an interview, instead of just telling me what she thinks I want to hear." Patricia studied his face, then sighed. "She's very qualified for the position. Her portfolio is strong, her references are excellent, and she clearly has the creative thinking we've been looking for. I'm going to recommend we hire her." "Good," Ethan said. "But Ethan, you need to be careful. You know the company policy about fraternization between supervisors and subordinates." "I'm aware of the policy," Ethan said. "I wrote the policy." "Then you know that being interested in an employee, even a potential employee, is complicated." "Who said I was interested?" Ethan asked, but his slight smile gave him away. Patricia shook her head. "I'm going to pretend I didn't see that smile, and remind you that HR exists to protect both the company and our employees. Whatever this is, be smart about it." "I'm always smart about things," Ethan said. "That's what concerns me," Patricia replied. because smart people are very good at rationalizing questionable decisions. Just promise me you'll think carefully before you do anything that could complicate Natalie's career or your position." "I promise," Ethan said, finally turning away from the window. "Now, shall we discuss the other candidates, or are you going to continue lecturing me about professional boundaries?" "The other candidates," Patricia said firmly. Though for the record, none of them sent cat gifts or almost fell on subway trains. Clearly they lack Natalie's innovative spirit, Ethan said, and Patricia couldn't quite tell if he was joking or not. Cumulative word count, 612 words. 3 days later, Natalie was eating cereal in her pajamas at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when her phone rang. She'd been stress eating and stress sleeping since the interview, alternating between certainty that she'd gotten the job and equally strong certainty that she'd completely humiliated herself and would never work again. Jamie had finally stopped asking for updates and had instead started leaving encouraging notes around the apartment. "You're amazing, and they'd be lucky to have you." Stuck to the bathroom mirror. "CEO boy is definitely into you." Tucked into the cereal box and mysteriously, "Confidence is sexy," taped to the inside of the refrigerator. The phone number wasn't one Natalie recognized, but it had the same area code as Hartley and Sullivan. Her heart started racing as she answered, trying to sound professional instead of like someone who'd been wallowing in self-doubt while wearing 3-day-old pajamas. "Hello? Natalie? This is Patricia Morrison from Hartley and Sullivan. Do you have a moment to talk?" Natalie set down her cereal bowl with shaking hands. "Yes, absolutely. I have all the moments, all of them. As many moments as you need." Patricia laughed warmly. "Wonderful. I'm calling with some good news. We'd like to offer you the marketing coordinator position." Natalie's brain short-circuited. They were offering her the job, the actual job, at the prestigious company where she'd had the world's most embarrassing and wonderful interview. "You, really? You want to hire me?" "We really want to hire you," Patricia confirmed. "Your interview was impressive. Your portfolio speaks for itself, and frankly, we were unanimous in our decision. You're exactly the kind of creative, honest, innovative thinker we want on our team." "Even though I send cat gifts and almost fall on subway trains?" "Especially because of that," Patricia said. "Those are features, not bugs, as far as we're concerned. Now, I'm going to email you an official offer letter with all the details about salary, benefits, start date. But I wanted to call personally to extend the offer and give you a chance to ask any immediate questions." Natalie had about 7 million questions, but her brain could only form one coherent thought. "When would I start?" "We were hoping for 2 weeks from Monday, if that works with your current employment situation. I know you're working at Brennan & Associates currently. Will that give you enough time to transition?" "My current boss will probably throw a party when I give notice," Natalie said honestly. 2 weeks is perfect." "Excellent. The email should be in your inbox within the hour. Take some time to review everything, discuss with family or friends if you need to, and let me know if you have any questions. We're all very excited to have you joining the team, Natalie." "Thank you so much," Natalie managed, her voice slightly choked with emotion. Thank you." After Patricia hung up, Natalie sat in stunned silence for approximately 30 seconds before letting out a scream that probably concerned the neighbors. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She had a new job at an amazing company with good benefits and a culture that appreciated cat gifts, and she was never going to have to deal with her terrible boss again. She immediately called Jamie, who answered on the first ring. "What happened? Are you okay? You sound like you're having some kind of episode." "I got the job," Natalie practically screamed. "They want to hire me. I'm going to work at Hartley and Sullivan." Jamie's delighted shriek matched Natalie's. "I knew it. I told you. CEO boy is definitely into you. And also, you're very qualified." "This has nothing to do with Ethan," Natalie protested, though her cheeks flushed at the thought of him. "I got this job on my own merit." "I'm sure you did," Jamie agreed. "But you can get a job on merit and also have your CEO boss think you're fascinating. These things aren't mutually exclusive." "He's not my CEO boss," Natalie said. "He's just the CEO of the company where I'll be working, which is completely different." "Uh-huh. Are you going to see him?" "I assume I'll see him occasionally in a professional capacity," Natalie said carefully. "It's a big company. I probably won't interact with the CEO very much in my day-to-day work." "But you want to," Jamie said knowingly. Natalie flopped back on the couch, clutching a throw pillow. "It doesn't matter what I want. There are probably rules about fraternization. Very strict rules. Rules that definitely apply to CEOs dating marketing coordinators who they met on subway trains." "So you've thought about dating him?" "I've thought about everything," Natalie admitted. "The subway conversation, the way he looked at me during the interview, the things he said." "But Jamie, he's a billionaire CEO, and I'm a person who doesn't understand how email works. We exist in completely different universes." "You exist in the same company now," Jamie pointed out. "And he seemed pretty interested in your universe during that interview, based on everything you told me." "Being interested in someone during an interview doesn't mean being interested," Natalie argued, though even she didn't sound convinced. Before Jamie could respond, Natalie's phone buzzed with an incoming email notification. She pulled the phone away from her ear to check, expecting to see the official offer letter from Patricia. Instead, she saw an email from an address she didn't recognize. Ethan. Hartley. HartleySullivan.com. Subject line: "Congratulations." Natalie's heart did a complicated flip. "Jamie, I have to go." "Is it another email from the company? Are they rescinding the offer?" I knew this was too good to be true. "No one's rescinding anything. I need to go. I'll call you back later." Natalie hung up before Jamie could protest, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the email from Ethan. "Natalie, Patricia tells me you've accepted our offer. I wanted to personally congratulate you and tell you how pleased I am that you'll be joining the Hartley and Sullivan team. I meant what I said in the interview. Your honesty, creativity, and willingness to take risks are exactly the qualities we value here. I'm looking forward to seeing what you'll accomplish. Also, for what it's worth, I think quarterly projections would be significantly improved if more people were brave enough to respond with cat gifs. You may have started a revolution. Welcome to the team, Ethan P.S. I hope your subway commutes have been less eventful lately, though I have to admit, I'm grateful for broken cars and aggressive train lurches. Otherwise, I would never have met the woman who thinks pineapple belongs on pizza and isn't afraid to defend that controversial stance. Natalie read the email 3 times, her cheeks flushing more with each reading. This was professional. Mostly professional. Except for the part about being grateful they'd met. And the part about remembering her pizza opinions. And the overall tone that felt warm and personal rather than the standard corporate congratulations. She should respond professionally. Keep appropriate boundaries. Remember that he was her new boss, and she was his new employee, and there were definitely rules about this kind of thing. Instead, she typed, "Ethan, thank you for the warm welcome. I'm excited to join the team and contribute to Hartley and Sullivan's continued success. And for the record, quarterly projections probably deserve more than just cat gifs. I'm thinking of expanding my response repertoire to include dog gifs, inspirational quotes, and possibly interpretive dance videos, depending on how boring the financial data is. Also, pineapple absolutely belongs on pizza, and I will defend this position in formal debate if necessary. I'm prepared to cite sources. Looking forward to starting in 2 weeks. Natalie P.S. My subway commutes have been disappointingly normal. No attractive CEOs saving me from disaster. It's almost boring. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately panicked. Had she really just sent an email to the CEO of her new company that mentioned his attractiveness? What was wrong with her? This was exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that got people fired before they even started. But before she could spiral into full panic mode, her phone buzzed with a response. Disappointingly normal sounds terrible. Perhaps you should consider taking different routes. I hear some subway lines are more exciting than others. And I look forward to the formal pineapple pizza debate. I'll schedule it for your first week. Consider it part of your orientation. Natalie stared at the email, her heart racing. Was he flirting? This felt like flirting. Professional flirting, maybe, but definitely flirting. And more importantly, was she flirting back? Because that email about attractive CEOs was definitely flirting. She needed advice, desperately. But Jamie would just tell her to go for it. And Jamie's romantic advice tended toward the impulsive. She needed someone with more perspective, someone who understood corporate politics and professional boundaries. She called her older sister Michelle, who worked as a lawyer and had opinions about everything. Michelle answered on the third ring. Please tell me you're calling with good news and not another story about accidentally setting something on fire. That was one time, and it was barely a fire, Natalie protested. And yes, good news. I got the job. The Hartley and Sullivan position. Natalie, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Thanks. But I need your professional opinion about something. Oh no. What did you do? Why do you assume I did something? Because I know you, Michelle said fondly. What happened? Natalie explained the entire situation. The subway meeting, the interview revelation, the job offer, and now the email exchange with Ethan. Michelle listened without interrupting, which Natalie appreciated because it meant she was taking this seriously instead of just being amused. So, Natalie finished. Is this inappropriate? Should I be responding differently? Am I reading too much into professional courtesy? Those are 3 separate questions with 3 complicated answers, Michelle said. First, is it inappropriate? Technically, yes. He's going to be your boss's boss's boss. Any romantic involvement would create a significant power imbalance and potential HR nightmare. Natalie's heart sank. That's what I thought. However, Michelle continued, I wouldn't call email exchanges about pizza toppings romantic involvement. You're being friendly and personable, which is actually good professional behavior. You're building rapport with senior leadership while maintaining appropriate boundaries. But the part about attractive CEOs was probably a little over the line, Michelle admitted, but not fireable. More like testing boundaries to see how he responds, which, based on what you've told me, he's doing too with comments about being grateful he met you. So what do? Natalie asked desperately. You start your new job, you do excellent work, and you see what develops naturally, Michelle said. If he continues to show interest in you as a person, not just an employee, then you can make decisions about how to navigate that. But Natalie, be smart about this. Don't let a crush on your CEO compromise your career before it even starts. It's not a crush, Natalie protested weakly. You spent 15 minutes describing his eyes and the way he laughs. It's definitely a crush. Natalie groaned. This is going to be so complicated. Welcome to adulthood, Michelle said cheerfully, where nothing is simple and everything is a potential HR violation. But seriously, congratulations on the job. You earned this. Just remember that you earned it because you're talented and creative, not because some CEO thinks you're charming. Even if he does think I'm charming? Natalie asked hopefully. Even then, your value isn't determined by whether some man is interested in you, even if that man is wealthy and attractive and apparently has good taste in marketing coordinators. After hanging up with Michelle, Natalie spent the rest of the afternoon oscillating between excitement about her new job and anxiety about seeing Ethan again. She gave notice at her current position the next day, enduring exactly 0 attempts by her boss to convince her to stay. In fact, he seemed almost relieved, which would have been insulting if Natalie hadn't been equally relieved to be leaving. Her last 2 weeks at Brennan & Associates passed in a blur of transition documents and exit interviews, and increasingly passive-aggressive notes from her boss about proper handoff procedures. Natalie smiled through all of it, knowing that in a few short days, she'd be starting somewhere new, somewhere better, somewhere that appreciated cat gifts and honest conversations. The night before her first day at Hartley & Sullivan, Natalie stood in front of her closet for approximately 45 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. Everything she owned suddenly seemed wrong. Too casual, too formal, too boring, trying too hard. Finally, Jamie physically removed her from the closet and picked out a simple navy dress that looked professional without being stuffy. "You're overthinking this," Jamie said firmly. "Just wear something you feel confident in, and remember that they already hired you. You don't have to prove anything." "I have to prove I deserve to be there," Natalie argued. "You proved that in the interview. Now you just have to show up and be yourself." Natalie barely slept that night, her mind racing with possibilities and anxieties. What if everyone else was more qualified? What if she couldn't live up to their expectations? What if she ran into Ethan in the elevator and said something embarrassing? What if she didn't run into Ethan and spent her entire first day disappointed? When her alarm went off at 6:30, Natalie was already awake. She showered, dried her hair with more care than usual, applied makeup with hands that shook only slightly. The navy dress fit perfectly, professional, but not boring. She looked, Natalie thought, like someone who deserved to work at a prestigious company, or at least someone who could fake it convincingly. The subway ride was uneventful. No attractive CEOs or near disasters. Natalie found herself almost disappointed by the normalcy. She arrived at the Hartley & Sullivan building with 20 minutes to spare, enough time to get through security, find the right floor, and possibly have a small panic attack in the bathroom. But when the elevator doors opened on the 20th floor, where the marketing department was located, Patricia was waiting with a warm smile and a welcome packet. "Natalie, perfect timing. Ready for your first day?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Natalie said, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. Patricia led her through the department, introducing her to what felt like 700 people, whose names Natalie immediately forgot. Everyone was friendly, welcoming, asking about her background and previous experience. Natalie's desk was in a bright corner, with a view of the city, much nicer than the windowless cube she'd occupied at her previous job. "We'll start with orientation this morning," Patricia explained. "Company policies, benefits information, IT setup, all the exciting paperwork. Then this afternoon, I'll introduce you to your team lead, and you can start getting familiar with current projects." The morning passed in a blur of forms and computer passwords and information about health insurance options. Natalie signed documents, created login credentials, received an ID badge with her picture that somehow made her look both professional and slightly terrified. By lunchtime, her brain was full of policy information, and her hand hurt from signing her name approximately 50,000 times. "Lunch is in the executive dining room on the 32nd floor, Patricia said. "It's one of the company perks. Good food, nice atmosphere, and you'll get to meet people from other departments." The 32nd floor, where Ethan's office was located, where she'd had her interview. Natalie's stomach fluttered with nerves as she stepped into the elevator with a group of other employees. The executive dining room was beautiful, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, and a buffet that looked like it belonged in a fancy restaurant rather than a corporate cafeteria. Natalie filled her plate with food she barely noticed, her eyes scanning the room automatically, looking for one specific person. And then she saw him. Ethan was standing near the windows, talking to a group of senior executives. He was wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than Natalie's rent, his hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the successful CEO. He was nodding at something one of the executives was saying, his expression serious and focused. Then, as if he could feel her watching him, he glanced up. Their eyes met across the crowded dining room, and Ethan's serious expression transformed into a smile. Not the professional smile he'd been giving the executives, but the genuine, warm smile Natalie remembered from the subway. He said something to the group he was with, then started making his way through the room toward her. Natalie's heart started racing. He was walking toward her, in front of everyone, on her first day. This was either really good or a complete disaster waiting to happen. "Ms. Chen," Ethan said when he reached her, his voice perfectly professional, but his eyes warm with that familiar amusement. "Welcome to your first day. How's the orientation going?" "Lots of paperwork," Natalie managed, acutely aware that people were watching them. "But Patricia's been wonderful, very thorough." "Excellent. Patricia runs the best onboarding program in the industry." Ethan glanced at her plate. "I see you found the good lunch options. The salmon is excellent today." "I honestly have no idea what I grabbed," Natalie admitted. "I was operating on autopilot." "First day nerves? Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows what to look for," Ethan said quietly. "But you're doing fine. Everyone's impressed with you already." "I've only been here for 4 hours. How could anyone be impressed?" "You'd be surprised what people notice," Ethan said. "Besides, I told everyone to make you feel welcome." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "You told everyone?" "I may have sent a company-wide email about our new marketing coordinator, who brings fresh perspectives and innovative thinking to the team," Ethan admitted. "It's standard procedure for new hires." "Is it standard procedure for the CEO to personally welcome new marketing coordinators in the executive dining room?" Natalie asked, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Ethan's smile widened slightly. "Maybe I'm making an exception for someone who defended pineapple on pizza with such passion. Speaking of which, I have the conference room booked for Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock, formal pizza topping debate. I'll provide the pizza and the judging panel." "You're serious?" "Completely serious. I told you it would be part of your orientation." "What if I lose?" Natalie challenged. "Then we'll know I hired someone with excellent qualities, except for terrible pizza opinions," Ethan said. "But I don't think you're going to lose. You seem like someone who comes prepared." Before Natalie could respond, one of the executives Ethan had been talking to earlier approached. "Ethan, sorry to interrupt, but we need your input on the Singapore proposal." "Of course," Ethan said smoothly. He turned back to Natalie, his expression shifting back to professional. "Enjoy your lunch, Ms. Chen. I look forward to seeing your work." "Thank you, Mr. Hartley," Natalie said, matching his formal tone, even though her heart was still racing. She watched him walk away, then became aware that several people were watching her with undisguised curiosity. She grabbed her plate and quickly found a seat at a table with a group of people who introduced themselves as the digital marketing team. So, one of them, a woman named Sarah, said with a friendly smile, "How do you know Ethan?" "I don't, really," Natalie said quickly. "We just met briefly before my interview." "He doesn't usually make a point of welcoming new coordinators personally," another team member, Marcus, observed. "You must have made quite an impression." "I almost fell on him in a subway train," Natalie blurted out, then immediately regretted her honesty. "I mean, he helped me when I stumbled on my way to the interview. He was just being polite." "Ethan's a lot of things," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but I've never known him to be randomly polite to strangers. He's friendly, don't get me wrong, but he's also incredibly busy. If he took time to help you and then personally welcomed you on your first day, there's probably a reason. Maybe he's just a good person, Natalie suggested weakly. Oh, he's definitely a good person, Marcus agreed. But he's also a very deliberate person. He doesn't do things without reason. Natalie spent the rest of lunch trying to redirect the conversation away from her interaction with Ethan and toward actual work topics. By the time she returned to her desk, she was exhausted from being on and desperately wanted to hide in a bathroom stall for approximately 20 minutes. Instead, she found a package on her desk. Small, wrapped in simple brown paper, with a note attached. For your first day. Consider it a company tradition. Rachel. Natalie glanced around, making sure no one was watching, then carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small potted succulent, similar to the one she'd mentioned having at her old job. And attached to the pot was another note. I believe you called yours Gerald. This one looks like a Charlotte. May she thrive under better working conditions. Also, there's a grow light being delivered to your desk tomorrow. No more wilting plants on my watch. P.S. Thursday at 2. Don't forget. Natalie clutched the succulent, fighting the urge to smile like an idiot. He remembered. He'd remembered her mentioning her plant, and he'd bought her a new one, and he was having a grow light delivered because he'd apparently paid attention to every single detail of their conversations. This was either the sweetest gesture she'd ever received or a massive red flag about appropriate workplace boundaries. Possibly both. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Did Charlotte arrive safely? I wanted to make sure she survived the elevator ride. Plants can be sensitive about vertical transportation. Ethan. Natalie stared at the text. Ethan had given her his personal number. Again. Or maybe it was the same number from before, and she just hadn't saved it. Either way, the CEO of her company was texting her about plants and elevator trauma. She saved the number under Ethan, CEO, do not send anything embarrassing, and typed back, Charlotte is perfect, thank you. This was incredibly thoughtful. My pleasure. See you Thursday. Try not to fall on any subway trains between now and then. No promises. Mondays are chaotic. Then I'll be sure to take the subway more often. Someone needs to catch you. Natalie's heart did that complicated flip again. This was flirting. Definitely flirting. And she was flirting back, which was probably a terrible idea but felt absolutely right. The afternoon was filled with actual work. Natalie met her team lead, a sharp woman named Jennifer, who immediately put her to work analyzing the performance metrics for their current social media campaigns. It was engaging, challenging work that required actual brain power, and Natalie found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of data analysis and strategic thinking. This was what she was good at, what she'd been hired to do. The Ethan situation was just complicated background noise. Except it wasn't really background noise, because Natalie found her thoughts drifting to him approximately every 5 minutes. The way he'd smiled at her in the dining room, the plant on her desk, the text messages that felt personal rather than professional. The pizza debate he'd scheduled, like it was a real business meeting. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Natalie was mentally exhausted. She packed up her things, said goodbye to her new coworkers, and headed toward the elevator. As the doors opened, she found herself face to face with Ethan, who was apparently leaving for the day at the same time. Ms. Chen, he said formally, but his eyes were warm. Heading out. First day complete, Natalie confirmed, stepping into the elevator. I survived. I never doubted it, Ethan said, pressing the button for the lobby. Though I have to say, I'm disappointed you didn't send any cat gifts today. It's only my first day. I'm saving the cat gifts for when I'm more established, and people can't fire me as easily. Wise strategy. They stood in comfortable silence as the elevator descended. Natalie was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the small space seemed to make the air between them feel charged with possibility. "Thank you for Charlotte," Natalie said quietly, "and for the grow light. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Ethan said simply. "Everyone deserves to start a new job with something living and green on their desk. It's good for morale." "Do you give all new employees succulents?" "Just the ones who make memorable first impressions," Ethan admitted. The elevator reached the lobby, and the doors opened to reveal the busy end-of-day crowd. Ethan gestured for Natalie to exit first, following her out into the marble expanse. "Well," Natalie said awkwardly, "thank you again. For everything. The job, the plant, the pizza debate booking." "Thursday at 2, Ethan reminded her. "I'm bringing evidence. Prepare yourself." "I'm always prepared," Natalie said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm counting on it," Ethan said. And then, lower, "Have a good evening, Natalie." The way he said her name, soft and intentional, made her forget how to breathe. "You too, Ethan." She walked away before she could say anything else inappropriate, her heart pounding with each step. This job was going to be amazing or a complete disaster, and Natalie honestly couldn't tell which. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories, and check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.